welcome to part 2 on the dangers of a single story. Now, Chimamanda refers to the othering discourse. Now, the other is, I'm not going to go into it now, but the other is a sociological term. So if any of you are familiar with sociology, you might be aware of the term, the other. It's the idea that people create in their mind, they construct a fictive, sort of mythical other, a person that, where they project all their sort of fears and fantasies onto, in order to try and make sense, to understand a different experience. But this creation of the other, it's it then kind of becomes, I'm not going to go into philosophy now, but it sort of becomes rarefied. That's a philosophical term to mean sort of fixated, turned into something concrete and real and lifelike, and they forget that actually this is just a construct, that the other is just a product of their own fantasies. So the othering discourse that Chimamanda refers to heightened any difference between herself and her white American roommate, so that, as she puts it, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her, the roommate, in any way. So that's a bit like, neurotypicals creating this mythical autistic person as a puzzle to be fixed, something so imponderably different and divergent from the norm that it just cannot be performed. But actually, I mean, I'll do another video on this at some point, because I actually want to get my words mixed up. I would like to write a blog article about this, about how actually autism is perfectly comprehensible. I mean, obviously, as an autistic person, it's comprehensible to me, but I think that non-autistic people can also understand and relate to autism as a part of human experience. But as I say, this othering discourse creates distance between the neurotypical observer and the autistic subject, which can be deeply alienating for the autistic subject. So likewise, as I said, neurotypical sometimes overemphasise how different autistic people are from them, which means we can be portrayed as aliens, actually, or even subhuman, beyond understanding, as I referred to earlier, the puzzle. Autism Speaks logo, which indeed is very offensive. The object of a neurotypical gaze. The other thing, the other becomes an object. Their subjecthood is removed because it's the dominant gaze, the privileged gaze. If you think, say, back in history, women have historically been othered by the male gaze. So here we have a neurotypical gaze turning the autistic into a specimen, something to be analysed, almost as though the autistic person is an animal in a cage. That's how it can appear sometimes, And the African became the object of a coloniser's gaze. People both fear and pity difference. The other is a creation of the viewer's imagination, own beliefs and fantasies, as I referred to earlier. Now, Africans were historically portrayed as having no agency and as waiting to be saved by a kind white foreigner, the white man's burden, think Kipling. This is parallels with autism, not being able to speak for ourselves, neurotypical speaking on our behalf. Now, obviously, it's true that historically it was assumed that, that autism, as a general rule, autistic people couldn't speak, because that back then, that was the assumption. At autism, it was nearly always non-verbal. We now know differently, of course, but I think things have, the sort of narrative has been slow to catch up. I mean, things are improving, but we do need more, I think, autistic kind of collaboration in research and just a general awareness of the autistic voice. But things are improving, which is really positive. Autism Speaks, of course, is ironic. The American charity has not caught up, because autistics are denied a voice. Now, in Western literature, such as Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Africa is portrayed as a place of negatives. The African is portrayed as being half devil, half child. It's a bit like the way autistics are infantilised, as though we're stuck in time. People forget that autistic adults exist. Often on billboards, you'll see a child's face, and it's trying to, invoke pity in a neurotypical observer, this poor child taken hostage by their autism. Think of like a poor African, waiting to be saved. It's very, very similar parallels, and you'll find this again with other minorities as well. Very similar narrative comes out again and again. Again, must be reflecting this sort of general trope within the consciousness. Now, this deprives Africans autistics of humanity. For example, according to the philosopher Hegel, the only history of Africa is the history of a white man in Africa. And not having history means not making history, as deprived of agency. And for autistic people, history was originally written for us by clinicians, neurotypical observers, the authorities. Subjective accounts are few and far between, but this is changing. However, it is interesting that when a minority attempts to reclaim agency, this can often be challenged by the dominant group. For example, when Chimamanda wrote her own novel about Africa, she was ironically told that it was not authentically African. Now that's a bit like when an actually autistic person writes about autism. Some neurotypicals, the so-called experts, the privileged gaze, from without, criticise the writings by saying that autistic people lack true insight. Men, women, lack true insight, that's what it used to say, in the olden days. Well, some men still say it. Very similar narratives going on here. Or even by saying that the person is too high functioning to be able to say anything meaningful about so-called real autism. We're caught in a double bind. It's like we can't really escape. We're either too autistic, and therefore we know nothing, or we're not autistic enough. And this is a way of denying autistic writers a voice. You can't have it both ways. Now, Chimamanda mentions the importance of power within storytelling. That's to say, how they are told, who tells them, gets to define how a group of people or a country is portrayed. If one story is told over and over by a powerful group in society about a minority, this leads to dispossession. Because America is powerful, there are many stories circulating about America. And so we are less able to stereotype. Because neurotypicals are powerful, there are many, many stories about neurotypicals. And so we are less able to stereotype. So the dominant narrative, the one that's in the ascendant, they're less likely to be stereotyped. You could stereotype Americans as all like gun-wielding maniacs, but we don't do that because we're aware of multiplicity. We're aware that would be a stereotype. But when it comes down to minority countries, minority voices, then that happens on a very regular basis. As Chimamanda puts it, all the stories of her life make her who she is. All the stories of life make who she is. But to focus only on the negative flattens her experience and overlooks the many other stories that formed her. Stories can empower and repair broken dignity. So if told well, we can repair the damage that a single story has done. Autistic people, the hashtag for autistic people, actually autistic, that's really positive because autistic people are now offering their own stories. There's a plethora of competing narratives to drown out just one story. And I think YouTube and modern media has been really fantastic in that regard because it really has opened up. It's really it's been a kind of an opening up and allowing different stories to be told. As this has led to sort of greater democracy, a democratization. A bit like a sort of glasnost. It's a glasnost, Gorbachev, if I remember correctly. Yeah, introduced, like a sort of opening up to different narratives. So it's multifaceted, positives, negatives, complexities. All stories must be told, no story should be silenced. So do go and check out Chimamanda's talk on the single story. As I say, I noticed a lot of parallels with the autistic experience. It'd be interesting to know what you feel about that. And, I've been thinking quite long and hard about the very interesting parallels with other minorities and othering discourses, as I referred to. You touched upon women, the way women have been othered throughout society, throughout history. Different. There is actually a book by Edward Said called Orientalism that I would like to read at some point. I touched upon it when I was at university, but I haven't properly read it. I've only read segments. And Edward Said really does talks about this othering discourse in there, and this notion of the exotic as a construct, how the Western world created the construct of the exotic East to enable them to then go out and plunder the East, to give a sort of justification, a reason for their plundering. So that's interesting, and also, of course, a lot of parallels with how poverty has been portrayed. If you think of Conrad's Heart of Darkness, you think also Victorian London, Darkness at Home, the way the Victorians portrayed the poor. Again, this sort of very kind of colonising gaze. And the way in which minorities have been dealt with. Often, for example, disabled people shunted off and put into institutions, out of sight, out of mind, so that they do not threaten the dominant order of the time. There's a lot of parallels here. It's very, very interesting. And also, of course, there's Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. I don't know if anyone of you have read that. It's another book that talks about the othering narrative as well. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and do post any comments down below. I'd be very interested to hear what you have to you think about these parallels. And and I look forward to speaking to you again next Wednesday. Thank you for watching.